Item number 3, council policy, political advertising on city property and right-of-way. City clerk, I'm guessing Patty's got something to say there.
Hi, good evening. I'll do an introduction. I think some other staff members will want to comment as well. So this is a new council policy on political advertising that would be on rights-of-way, public property, and in particular, a polling location on election day. And this issue, you've seen it before. Back in 2008, we had a very similar resolution, and I'll let the city attorney speak to sort of the progression or changes of opinions from the attorney general. But what brings us tonight is several weeks before the state primary, we did have a complaint about a political sign, and it was posted on public property. And in speaking with the Attorney General, they gave us advice that until the governing body had stipulated where political signs were prohibited, we didn't have the authority to go and remove the sign. This differs from an opinion several years ago from the Attorney General, but we wanted to take the opportunity, since we have one that actually, we appreciate the opportunity to clarify this matter, because this has been a point of confusion both for candidates and election officials over the years. So what this resolution does is it has a statement that it permits political signs to be posted, meaning sort of stuck in the ground, on city rights of way where their placement does not interfere with maintenance, public safety issues, that sort of thing. But it specifically prohibits them in certain locations. So Central Square, the Rotaries, sort of the splinter islands coming into the Rotary, several medians in the city, public property, so parks, cemeteries, any of our city facilities. So it's saying that you cannot post a political sign on those properties. It goes further to talk about Election Day, and that's really sort of how I got brought into this, is because the Attorney General's office sends representatives from their office every time there is a state election, and they do a sort of a checklist of what they see at polling locations. And the issue of unattended political signs has been brought to our attention for the last several elections, that we needed to be clear as to where they could be, or where we sort of need to carve out a spot where unattended political signs could be permitted. And there's been a lot of confusion as to, well, what's the property place? Is it like 150 feet from the front door, or is it the full meets and bounds of that piece of property according to the tax map? And we sort of settled on saying, well, the polling location property is everything except for the part that's adjacent to the public way, so the little bit of the right-of-way. And so we're hoping that this will be a great compromise that will be met well with our candidates. So we would say that unattended political signs could be sort of on the perimeter of the polling location property on election day. And other than that, your political sign must be handheld. And even then, there's restrictions, but you can get a little closer to actually where the voters are entering the polling place. So that's what this resolution does. Again, you saw a very similar one in 2008. At that point, the Attorney General was of the opinion that we didn't have the authority to enact that, and it was in fact defeated. But again, now this Attorney General, who is staffing this sort of the election process, has given us differing advice. And so we want to act on that as the sort of, we view ourselves as a property owner, and we want to exert our authority over this.
Makes sense. Questions from the committee? Bob, please.
Thank you, Patty. You had indicated that this was initiated by a complaint about a sign. What was the circumstance of that particular sign that caused the complaint? Was it compliant with the state law at the time, or the complaint was the location of it being in a roundabout? Or
the location was on a public piece of property, so it was at the rec center, not election day, but it was posted at the rec center several weeks before.
But not in a right of way?
But not in the right way. Well, it actually might have been close to the right of way, but again, at that point in time, a lot of confusion. We didn't know if we had the authority to remove it, not remove it. Called the AG, they said, oh, you don't have the authority to remove it till the governing body says you have the authority.
So the governing if I may, so the governing body is now saying we have a little more leeway as far as the laws that we can impose at a local level. This is not something, so the state laws have not changed.
State laws have not changed. Now, we'll defer to the attorney, but my understanding is someone else reading the statute, they have a different opinion of it.
Okay, thank you.
It's a poorly worded statute.
Terribly worded.
Aren't they all?
I guess, just two thoughts. One is, so we're saying the perimeter around, if you look at any place you go vote, you can't do any electioneering, right? It's like 75 feet, is it? Or I can't remember.
It is no more than 75 feet, no less than 25 feet for sort of the electioneering of handheld signs or any sort of interaction with a voter as they're walking into the polling place.
All right, so essentially the door.
Close to the door.
75 feet from the door.
Yeah.
You gotta leave people alone, no signs, no nothing.
You have to be, again, handheld signs have to be at a certain spot so that the voter doesn't have to walk through a gauntlet of political signs. This resolution doesn't address that statute. This is only talking about unattended signs
Okay.
on the polling place location on election day is one of the provisions.
Okay, so I have to ask the question, who's gonna be policing this?
Attorney General's office.
So,
No, if I may, Mr. Chairman, frankly, and that's why the Public Works Director has remained here for this discussion this evening. In general, what happens is if there are signs now that are going to be located in these sort of prohibited areas, except at these permitted times, then the Public Works Department is authorized to go and collect them. They have to hold them at the Public Works Department and store them for a period of time to allow the candidate to come and retrieve them. But if signs are posted within the roundabouts or within these prohibited locations, the Public Works Department has the authority to go and collect them. And that would also be true if signs are posted on public property, including polling places, on non-election day. So, for example, the rec center, which is that's a polling location, isn't it? The rec center, until election day, signs would not be permitted on the rec center property, even in the right-of-way, because that's still public property. However, on election day, because it is a polling place, it would be provided some latitude permitted in the edge of the right-of-way.
okay, so the day after election day, you're gonna grab every one of
They're
them?
gone. Soon thereafter.
I'm actually really good with that. As a person who puts signs up, it's always been a religious thing for me, not religious, but reoccurring thing that when the election's over, 7 o'clock, we walk out, first thing I do is get my car, drive around, because they're counting everything up, and I pick up all the signs, and it's the right thing to do. George?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually have a question for Court, if he'd be so kind. I'm curious as to the net effect, because I imagine having the political signs say, in the places that are being maintained, it adds a certain amount of time to maintaining the property in their regular activities. So what, in your guesstimation, do you think is the time that would be saved by not having some of these signs in those areas?
Corporal Holmes, Public Works Director. Certainly, I think the areas that have been specified, particularly the downtown, it probably increases if we have to, for example, we're doing mowing, and the individual has to try to mow around each individual sign, you're increasing his effort by about 25%.
Okay.
So it would dramatically impact our ability to accomplish certain tasks.
So probably, if I may,
Please.
so probably the net benefit of not having these signs in that location is going to be better than having to go retrieve signs that maybe for a short period of time while people get used to the new rules.
It certainly, I think, retrieving is much easier. I retrieve them when I drive back from City Hall, back and forth. I'll stop and grab them, throw them in the back of my car, truck, and most of again, our foremen, they're instructed to do that, and they know the area. So that's less time than trying to do maintenance work around them.
So Public Works is in favor of this change.
Oh, well, just a background is as the clerk said, our position has been, and when there was a change in the statute about that 2008 period, and it was hot around our network too, because political signs, both for the state and for municipalities, are sometimes difficult for us to continue to do our maintenance. And the way that it was worded such that we could remove them if they interfere with maintenance or if they interfere with safety. So it was a little bit more of a, certainly people could argue with you whether why can't you just move it over back and forth? Now with this interpretation where it allows us to specify certain areas, we're now out of that sort of argument with folks about, well, gee, why can't you move it? And, well, what's wrong with just being 2 feet over here? So it does save some effort in dealing with some of the parties and some of the candidates.
Please, Bob.
Hi, Patty, I'm just curious as to, so we have somebody new who has a different interpretation of the state law. The next person could have an alternative interpretation of the state law and seek to overturn this. So I guess I'm in favor of just kind of sticking with the state law. Everybody who registers in this town comes into the city clerk's office. I'd rather be in favor of just advising people, well, this is the preference of the city. It's, a little bit beyond the state law. We'd prefer if you just did it in the rights of way, not on roundabouts, not on Central Square, and not at the polling places. I guess that's my view. Could you help me understand why this would be more beneficial to the city of Keene, and why we have to have our own rules compared to every other municipality in the state?
If you don't mind, I'm going to pick that up because I had the conversation with the Attorney General's office, and I was involved with the Attorney General's office back in 2008. I have to tell you, quite frankly, I didn't agree with the Attorney General's opinion back in 2008. Now, keep in mind, we are not talking about the Attorney General. We're talking about the individual who holds this particular spot at any particular time. And as you probably all know, the turnover in the state basis, including the Attorney General's office, is fairly frequent. Yeah. So we have individuals that come in, and if you read the statute, what the statute says basically is that you can't place the signs without the permission of the owner, and it includes municipalities within that sentence. So my opinion back in 2008, which is in conformance with the opinion that is now being issued by the new Attorney General who's involved in this, is that you have to read all of the statutes together. There is one, as you note, that's been referenced in the materials that comes out of the state, from the town structure, but towns and cities both have the same statutory authority. That statute, when you read it, says that the governing body, you and the city council, have the authority to create an ordinance or a bylaw regulating these kinds of things for purposes of electioneering. If you read that statute together with the one that deals with placement on public property, it really does argue in favor of having a standard that everybody can see and everybody can read, and there's no political underpinnings necessitated by it that people will have to follow. My position, Counselor, with respect to that, while I appreciate your opinion on it, is it's much better, especially when you're talking about political speech, to have a standard that can be objective, that you can hold up and you can say, this is what's required and this is what we expect. And from my perspective, and now with the current Attorney General's opinion, it does comply with the law and is in fact required by the law. The other reason why we're suggesting this, quite frankly, is because we have two parents up there. We have the Secretary of State parent and we have the Attorney General parent. And both of those parents don't necessarily agree. The problem is that the enforcement parent is the Attorney General's office. So when it comes to having two parents standing in front of you, one asking you to do something and one saying you better do something, I'd rather be on the side of the parent that's saying you better do something. And having this policy, quite frankly, helps us look at both of these parents and say, we did what this parent said that we should do, the Attorney General's office said we should do. If the two of you don't agree with this, you need to go figure it out and tell us what to do. And we would be happy to do, at that point, what you want us to do. That's why we are certainly, at least my office is certainly in favor of this at this point.
Yeah, it sounds a lot better than in 2008.
Yes.
It was pretty...
It was 2008 was too squirrely.
Squirrely is a good word. Is that a legal term?
It's a legal term.
George, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question about the language of the resolution. So I imagine that when it says, now therefore be it resolved that political advertising is prohibited on Main Street, we're only talking about public property.
This, absolutely. That's a very good catch. Thank you very much. The statute
Yeah.
basically doesn't apply, at least from our perspective. If you're on private property, you have First Amendment right to put your sign up on private property, with respect to where you locate. This deals with public property, public rights of way, public property. That's correct.
So if we could adjust the language to, make that clear to me, just reading it. I don't know if,
Well, but
is there
under
a
the
place in
statute,
here
we
that
wouldn't
it says?
Under the statute, we wouldn't be able to apply.
We wouldn't be able to anyway, so it
wouldn't be able to anyway.
doesn't, so it doesn't matter.
Right,
Okay.
exactly.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, Phil, and then,
Yeah, I'm going to ask this for Patty, because she's probably one of the only people that remembers this. When we built the roundabout at Marlborough Street, Main and Marlborough, we had a policy there for no campaign signs. And then if you remember, we received a letter from Peter Bradshaw asking us to include the medians also in that area. And there was a reason why we couldn't.
That's the same period as the Attorney General saying that we didn't have the authority to do that.
Okay.
Also in that discussion, because I was reading those minutes, there was a sort of well, what is a splinter island? Splitter island. What is a splitter island? And that was sort of the back and forth going on in the committee. How are you going to define that? Is it 25 feet from the roundabout? So that is the same point in time that we finally got the opinion from the AG office early in February that even though you've been talking about this for the last several months, because it was an issue before this committee for several months, at that point in time they said we didn't have the authority to enact the resolution and the council defeated it. But that is the same occurrence as I was referring to.
Can I ask
go right ahead, Phil.
one more question is, sometimes we get signs put out that aren't political. You'll get Joe's Plumbing and Heating or something like that. They fall under that same standard.
They fall under the sign code. Those would be off-premises signs, which would fall, if depending upon whether it's in the right-of-way or where it's at. But the Public Works Director can speak to that if you'd like to.
The object within the right-of-way is considered an obstruction unless it's been given permission through our office, we remove it. So any of those kind of A-frame signs or plumbing signs or anything like that, if we know about them, if we come across them, we will pull them up, bring them to the office, and hang on to them for a little bit so somebody wants to come claim them.
Thank you.
Also, Terry? We're all friends here. I mean, go ahead, Terry. I mean, it's first time for Councilor Clark.
Harry Clark, City Councilor, Ward 3. I am totally in favor of this ordinance. Over the years, it's gotten better or worse, and then better and worse. And frankly, I've never understood the reason that some people interpret it one way or another. And they may have changed the ordinances or added ordinances, but I had a situation in 1986. I was the chair of the Democratic Party in Keene, and we had a fellow who was a very non-political fellow, and they were at a bar or something, and they got in a heated argument over politics. And the next morning he woke up, and he had every Joe Blow political sign on his yard. All of his buddies went around the town and stole all of whatever particular fellow was and stuck it on his lawn. And, well, that was quite a joke until one of the fellows that did it actually got arrested for stealing private property. One of the county political chairs complained and actually swore out but the end of it was that they were found not guilty because of the statute, which says, it said that you shall not put a sign in a public way. I mean, maybe there's more to it but that's how I interpret it. I mean, if it's in a public way, I mean, it's just like the discussion we had with lines. It's we put lines on the street for safety, and we design streets and intersections for safety. And when you start, especially during a presidential year, I mean, we get elections every year now, but the presidential year, I mean, it's absolutely insane. You can't see the forest through the trees. You can't see anything. So it is very unsafe. I think the interpretation problem is just because, because these are politicians that are breaking the law. These are the ones who are putting their signs in public ways. So we're not going to interpret it that they're breaking the law. I mean, I think, as an aside, one of the problems with that, if you put it in the public way, one of the problems is there is no actionable penalty. I mean, if you rob a bank, you get 20 years, right? But if you take down a political sign from a public way, there's no penalty. You have 30 days in which to remove the sign. So can you imagine a bank robber? Well, you know, I robbed the bank and my penalty would be I have to return the money in 30 days. You know, it just doesn't make any sense. But because of this Attorney General's interpretation and giving us authority to actually put bounds on this is an absolutely wonderful idea. And I think we ought to take advantage of it before they change their mind.
Okay, thank you. Bob, please.
Yeah, just reading through this, I mean, I'm looking at the locations and definitions. It seems to me that, and while I do believe a lot of the signs are a blight on the environment, I do believe in free speech, and it seems to me that a lot of this would really wipe out about 90% of the signs that are presently stuck in the ground right now. So I'm going to be voting against this. I feel that this is too restrictive on speech. I think it's part of the political process, as ugly as it may be. And that's just my comment. Thank you.
All righty. Any further comments or questions?
Just make a
George,
comment.
please.
I don't really see this as a big deal. I think the political yard signs in general, more and more people are realizing how little effect they actually have, and especially with social media and other kinds of ways of getting yourself out there. This doesn't really bother me, and if it's easier for Public Works and our employees who are taking care of the maintenance of the city grounds, then why not?
It's funny. You know what it tells me is how my friends voting. I mean, because on election day, I know what I'm going to do. There isn't a sign in the world that's going to change my mind. But if I drive down the street, oh, hey, yeah, look how Ed's going this year. That's what I think about them. Put them out on your front yard. No, I'll support this. I like it. You okay with making the motion, even though you're against?
I'll make the motion that I'll vote against, sure.
Certainly.
I move to recommend the Planning License Development Committee recommend to the City Council approval of the council policy relating to political advertising on city property, public rights-of-way, and polling locations.
So, I'll give them the number.
Resolution number.
Yeah,
Resolution R 2016-31.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? There being none, all in favor? Opposed? And it's 3-1. That wraps up the bill of fare for this evening. Thanks for attending. We are adjourned.